Hello everybody, we're going to hit you up with another presidential election. This one, the election of 1812. James Madison going to go for the second term, right smack dab in the middle of a war. Is he going to get it done? Let's get to it right now. Now, the incoming party is the Democratic Republicans, have won every presidential election since 1800. And the incumbent is James Madison of Virginia. He is going to face opposition from within his own party, though, for renomination from a couple of guys, DeWitt Clinton, the mayor of New York City and the lieutenant governor of New York, and from his uncle, the sitting vice president, George Clinton, also of New York. Now, many Democratic Republicans in the northern states were unhappy over the perceived dominance of the presidency by the state of Virginia, this so-called Virginia dynasty. Washington was a Virginian, Jefferson was a Virginian, and Madison was a Virginian. The only non-Virginian in there is John Adams. John Adams was from Massachusetts. And they wished to nominate one of their own rather than renominate Madison. Now, initially, they were pinning their hopes on the sitting vice president, George Clinton, but his chances are pretty much eliminated because he was not only 72 years old, but he was also in poor health. His nephew, DeWitt Clinton, was considered the preferred candidate to move against Madison by the Northern Democratic Republicans. Hoping to forestall a serious movement against incumbent President James Madison and a division of the Democratic-Republican Party, some proposed making DeWitt Clinton the nominee for the vice presidency, taking over the same office his uncle now held. DeWitt was not opposed to the offer, but preferred to wait until after the conclusion of the New York caucus, which would not be held until after the Congressional caucus had met to finalize this decision. On April the 20th, 1812, George Clinton became the first vice president to die in office. So, if these dissident Democratic Republicans wanted to nominate someone to take down in an attempt to take down Madison, they would have to rely on the nephew now, since the uncle was obviously dead. So going on here, on May 18th of 1812, so about a month before the War of 1812 started, the caucus was held and Madison was renominated for a second term. Only 86 of the 134 Democratic Republican senators and congressmen participated in the caucus. Now, since DeWitt Clinton was still saying, maybe I'll accept the nomination for vice president so I can succeed my uncle in the office, or maybe I won't accept it. So there were other candidates for vice president, and they were the governor of New Hampshire, John Langdon, and the governor of Massachusetts, Elbridge Gerry, both Northerners. Now, the caucus would nominate Governor Langdon in order to balance the ticket, but Langdon would decline because of his own old age. He was 70. So a second caucus ended up nominating the governor of Massachusetts, Elbridge Gerry, to be Madison's vice president. And although Gerry was not much younger than Langdon, he was 68, Gerry would accept the nomination. Now, New York, they held their caucus on May 29th, and they voted to nominate DeWitt Clinton, almost unanimously, for the presidency. Now, we're having the Democratic Republicans really divided here. We have Democratic Republicans that support President Madison, and we have Democratic Republicans that support Mr. Clinton. But what about the Federalists? Now, before DeWitt Clinton came around, the Federalists were looking to the Chief Justice, John Marshall of Virginia, as their presidential nominee. Marshall would have more than likely carried the North, and also giving Monroe a run for his money in Virginia and North Carolina. The Federalists' only influence really in the government was on the Supreme Court at this point. But with Clinton entering the race, the Federalists will no longer be able to count on the electoral votes in New York, and this possibly could have thrown the election into the House of Representatives, and Madison would have more than likely been reelected anyway, because the House is dominated by Democratic Republicans. So Marshall declines to contest in this election, and they're also going to go with DeWitt Clinton as their presidential nominee. So this dissident Democratic Republican is really going to run under a fusionist ticket, since the Federalists went with him as well. Electoral fusion is when a candidate runs for an office, but two parties nominate him. Now the Federalists are going, a Federalist caucus is going to meet in Pennsylvania, and they're going to nominate the Attorney General of Pennsylvania, Jared Ingersoll, as DeWitt Clinton's running mate. Now, this presidential election is known for being the first presidential election to take place during a time of war. This would happen two more times in American history, one in 1864 during the Civil War, and 1944 during World War II. Now, the seeds of war were being planted during Madison's first term. Military conflict from the Napoleonic Wars were steadily worsening, with the British and the French both ignoring the rights of the United States to be neutral in this whole situation, and both of these countries started seizing American ships at sea. Now the British took it a step further, and they were looking for supposed British deserters and impressed them into the Royal Navy. Impressment was basically you board another country's ship, and you force their seamen to join your navy. That's basically what impressment is. Now, to really add on to the can of worms here that the British are opening, they maintain forts within United States territory in the Northwest. Remember, they were supposed to vacate those forts initially after the American Revolution had come to an end, but obviously they didn't, and Jay's Treaty was supposed to resolve all that. Obviously, as we see now, Jay's Treaty did not do that. And also they supported Native Americans who are at war with the United States in both the Northwest and the Southwest. Now, Madison was getting pressured to declare war on Britain because of those things, but also because expansionists in the South and in the West, they wanted Canada and they wanted Florida. Canada was under the control of the British. Florida was under control of Spain. And they wanted to use British provocations as a pretext to seize both areas. Now, at the end of the day, the pressure is just a little bit too much for Madison. June 12, 1812, he requests Congress, and he gets it, for a declaration of war against Britain. So this is the first time in American history that war has been declared, and now we're in a war that we're really unprepared for, because the British had one of the best navies in the world. We only had about 20 ships. Their army was beating Napoleon, while we barely had a militia. Now, we'll talk more in detail about the war in the next election video. But that was just a little bit of the prelude to the war. Basically, what caused the war to be declared in the first place. Now, the campaign, the 1812 campaign, was completely dominated by the War of 1812. Clinton, he decided to run a regional campaign. He adopted an anti-war stance in the Northeast and a pro-war stance in the South and West. Remember, the Northeast is Federalist territory, and the Federalists were opposed to this war, and the Northeast was most harmed by the war because the Northeast relied on trade to keep their region going. So obviously, knowing that Clinton had to appeal to the Federalists if he wanted to win this election, and knowing the fact that the Federalists are a northern-based party, he is going to adopt that anti-war stance up north. Now, when he goes to the South and to the West, which is Democratic Republican territory, and Democratic Republicans are for the war, he's going to adopt a pro-war stance. He's going to adopt that pro-war stance. Now, this election would ultimately be decided by whoever carried New York and whoever carried Pennsylvania. Who's going to do that? Let's find out the results right now. Even though this is a squeaker, Madison is going to win re-election. It is going to be a close one. Madison receives 128 electoral votes. Clinton receives 89. In terms of the popular vote, this is really close. 50.4% for Madison, 47.6% for Clinton. Now, DeWitt Clinton would carry New York as he would most of the Northeast, but Madison would carry Pennsylvania. So Clinton lost the election when he failed to carry Pennsylvania. This is the closest presidential election up to this point in terms of the popular votes, and this is although the Federalists really didn't nominate anybody, and through their support behind Clinton, this is the best showing that the Federalists have had since the days of John Adams. Because not only did they give Madison a run for their money with DeWitt Clinton, they also made significant gains in Congress. But those gains aren't going, but that sort of euphoria, I suppose, for the Federalists isn't going to last very long. And we will know why in the next election video, the election of 1816. Alrighty, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't seen any of my previous videos, go on ahead and watch those if you want. And with that, we will see you next time.